It's time for Lefties Losing It. And I've always said the most racist, bigoted folk in the West are the modern left. They are shameless about it. Their race obsessions are frankly sick. And so much of what they do is projection. They accuse their political opponents of what they themselves are guilty of. And here is another example. Watch these anti-ICE activists call a black agent the N-word after accusing him of ripping people from their families.
About having our energy, like we should rip people apart from their families.
Are you a man?
Wow. Wow, is that a question?
Wow.
Okay. How do you feel about ripping people from their families? Does that feel good?
I love people.
Sir, I need to move.
Where'd you put a KKK? Why are you calling a woman a man? I mean, what kind of a guy does that?
They used the N-word there at least 3 times, and they seemed extra angry that he asked quite reasonably if the dude in the dress was a man. Apparently misgendering a man pretending to be a woman means you can be called the N-word repeatedly. Let's check in with a male nurse now who seems to be advocating for all sorts of behaviours that would be a breach of the Hippocratic Oath.
Remember how much power nurses have in this country? One of our own was just murdered in the street. So, we might be able to stop this somehow. The type of ICU nurse I was cardiac ICU nurse. And I did a lot of time, lots of hours, holding on a groin that wouldn't stop bleeding. Let me tell you what, that femoral artery, the vasculature in the leg, it really bleeds well. Someone could bleed out very quickly from that, probably like a couple of minutes, really.
When I tell you these people are nuts, I'm not kidding. Nuts and nasty and with a false sense of moral superiority.
I would really suggest to all the healthcare organizations out there that if you have knowingly MAGA employees, that you terminate them. They're not safe people to take care of other people.
Yeah, it's the MAGA nurses and doctors that are a threat to patients. What was I saying before about projection? That's all the left have these days, lies and projection. And earlier today, the dude there, Chad, lost his job, thank God. You know, after that vileness, let's have a little fun. This next clip has sent the online left into fits of unbridled rage. I can't imagine why. What could be more delightful than a Nicki Minaj, Scott Percent collab? I did not think we'd see a Minaj collaboration with the Treasury Secretary in my lifetime, but here we are, and we were treated to this delightful pairing as well.
With my favorite president, the best president of all time.
And I'm with the Queen of Rap.
You know, the president seems much happier in the company of superstar Nicki Minaj than members of the media, including the perpetually miserable CNN anchor Caitlin Collins. Watch this exchange from earlier today.
What did you say?
What would you say to the survivors who feel they haven't gotten justice?
You are the worst reporter. No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. You know, she's a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen a smile on your face.
I'm asking you about survivors.
You know why you're not smiling? Because you know you're not telling the truth. And you're a very dishonest organization, and they should be ashamed of you.
Now, Nicki Minaj has put the issue of voter ID back on the agenda, and the latest polling is clear. People of all colours, backgrounds and political persuasions want to see voter ID, except the hard left that dominate the media, political and activist class. Even CNN has had to admit that the overwhelming majority of Americans want voter ID.
83% in the last year of Americans agree with Nicki Minaj. They favor photo ID to be able to vote.
What about by party? What's the party breakdown?
Yeah, normally you might expect, hey, there'd be a big divide by party with Republicans really for it and Democrats really against it. But not really here. I mean, just take a look here. Favorite photo ID to vote. You got 95% of Republicans, pretty much all of them, but even 71% of Democrats favor photo ID to vote.
Okay, that all seems rather emphatic, but what about the racial background? Because that's what the left has been arguing for years, that voter ID is racist.
85% of white people favor it, 82% of Latino, 76% of Black Americans favor it. So the bottom line is this. Voter ID is not controversial in this country. A photo ID to vote is not controversial in this country. It is not controversial by party, and it is not controversial by race. The vast majority of Americans agree with Nicki Minaj that, in fact, you should have a photo ID to be able to vote.
Wow, 82% of Latino and 76% of Black voters favour voter ID, and yet the left will argue it is racist and designed to stop minorities from voting. Let's have a look at how the left view minority voters and voter ID. The casual bigotry you're about to hear is astounding. This is the bigotry of low expectations.
Do you have an opinion on voter ID laws?
Yeah, they're usually pretty racist and they're bad. I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far to say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for Black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for Black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data.
For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed.
I also think there's a repression of Black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the African Americans.
Okay, let me get this straight. According to the left, people of colour are either too dumb or too poor to have ID, or they're criminals. Let's bring in the man behind that Vox Pop documentary filmmaker and commentator, Ami Horowitz. Ami, before I get your input, let's have a look at you in East Harlem speaking to Black folk about what white leftists think of their ability to get ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any Black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. That's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any Black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
It is a weird thing to say, but here we are with the Democrats and the propagandists in the media claiming voter ID is inherently racist.
Yeah, who was that young, handsome man on camera? Wow, I barely recognize him anymore. Not to pat myself on the back, but that video has over 250 million views, Yeah, well, I guess I will pat myself on the back. What do you want from me?
No, that deserves a pat. That deserves a pat.
Thank you. A little background on that video. Not only is it crazy how they've made the argument that voter ID is racist, and that's really the argument the left, the entire left, not just the radical left, but the mainstream Democratic left has made. It's also they deny that there's voter fraud out there. And the reason why I made that video originally is because I was going to vote and in Los Angeles at the time, and my father had died just 6-7 months prior to that. And I went to vote, and his name was on the voter rolls, okay, which I wasn't crazy because, he just died. I don't know how long it takes them to read the voter rolls, but somebody had voted for him, right? There's a check mark next to the name. And I said to the guy, my father died. He's dead. Somebody came in, gave his name, gave his address, because it's easy to look that up, and they voted for him. And that's what inspired me to do that video, because there's massive amount of voter fraud out there, and voter ID would eliminate a lot of that. But yeah, the racism of the left is on full display there. They couldn't imagine black people had the ability to vote, to have to think like a white person, right? That's the entire ethos of the left. And it's always about the left often mistakes and conflates class and race. They do that a lot. And the pushback I got from that video every time I was doing interviews from the left was saying, well, if you went to rural Alabama, they wouldn't have the same perspective because it's harder for them to go to get ID. I go, but rural Alabama or rural North Carolina are mostly poor white people. It's about poverty level, not about race. But by the way, just as an aside, even people in rural Alabama all have ID. This is a almost universal thing that people have ID. Yet I thank the left for that, Rita, because I've created a kind of a cottage industry doing videos about how the left is racist about black people when it comes to obesity. I remember I did an obesity video, same kind of idea. And they told me, yeah, the reason why there's more obesity in the black community is because black people stress eat because of so much racism. And of course, I went to Harlem, they laughed at that. I kid you not, I couldn't make that up, right? Or defund the police, and call the people on the left for saying defund the police is wonderful. I go to Harlem, they go, no, please. And we're the last people who want to defund the police. So yeah, it's just a hallmark of the left. Absolutely.
Let's check in now on Don Lemon, who appeared with Jimmy Kimmel, and two bigger victim-playing attention seekers you will not find.
They wouldn't have to have all these people following me around.
It's more than just a waste of resources. So they grab you and they take you where?
Well, you're right about more than just a waste of resources. They want that. They want to embarrass you. They want to intimidate you. They want to instill fear. And so that's why they did it that way.
I got to say, Don Lemon is loving this. He hasn't had this much attention for years. Now let's hear from LA Mayor Karen Bass, who claims that Don Lemon being arrested for storming a church during Sunday service is somehow a racial matter.
I have a particular message to Black America that it's interesting that I believe the journalists that were arrested all look like me and you. 10 seconds. And so this is not the first time this has happened. Yes. As a matter of fact, the journalist that is with me, Jasmine, was arrested a few years ago.
Army, what's your response to that? Is there a racial element in the prosecution of Don Lemon?
God. No. Look, Karen Bass is low-key one of the worst mayors in America. We don't talk about her enough is the problem. We talk about a lot of Mamdani. We talk about the mayor of Chicago, Brandon. Yeah, we got to talk a little more about, my resolution in 2026, talk more about Karen Bass. She's a horrible, absolute horrible mayor. Look, I know it seems like, I'm going to let people under the kimono a little bit here for the show. I know it seems like that when I do this 15-minute interview every week, that I just kind of sit down, pop down, and then I just drop, knowledge all across the place. But the reality is I do show prep, okay? That's the truth. And yeah, look, she's kind of right that in 2025, under Trump, 32 journalists were arrested by Donald Trump. Yeah, that is absolutely true. Problem was in 2024, 49 journalists were arrested under the Biden administration. So I'm not sure that narrative actually works for her. Look, the truth is that, look, Don Lemon, full disclosure, kind of a friend of mine. I like Don. We talk on the phone a lot. We obviously are very different people. And I'm not gonna, and this is not, our friendship is not gonna color my next point, but I gotta tell you, and by the way, he is loving it, of course. My God, after he was fired from CNN, he's never been more popular, of course. This was a godsend for him. Let's be totally honest, okay? He was the bore of irrelevancy. Sorry, Don. But now he's had this resurgence. Good for him. But the truth is, I don't think this was a good idea. I think this was a own goal by the Trump administration. You're just getting you're allowing people to hook sink their hooks onto an issue which is relatively irrelevant. And it's moving from the agenda and from what he really wants to accomplish. When they start saying, look, you're arresting journalists, Don Lemon wasn't doing anything. And look, do I think Don Lemon should have been arrested? I don't. As somebody who engaged in guerrilla journalism a lot, Yeah, was he there? Did he have foreknowledge? Of course he did. Yes, he knew exactly what was going on. But this is kind of what journalists do. You don't get arrested for going on a ride along with criminals. Just kind of the reality. It's a fine line. There's a FACE Act, and he may have crossed that line there. I get it. But the more important thing is I think it's distracting.
That legislation. That legislation exists. I do agree it's distracting, and you can look at it as an own goal because the left is going to run a particular narrative here about the media being oppressed and free speech being breached, all that nonsense. But he, on the face of it, appears to have broken the law. You can't go storming churches during Sunday service, terrifying families, including small children, and then just say I was doing journalism. You'd be arrested if you did that in a mosque or if it happened really any place other than a church. It seems like anything goes. But before you go, I want to get your take on what's happening in New York right now. The new mayor there, Zohran Mamdani, has overseen a tragic period where 16 people have died during this cold snap you're having. Mamdani ordered the NYPD not to tear down homeless encampments. And Army, that act of so-called compassion has arguably contributed to more suffering and the tragic outcome of 10 people dead in a single weekend in the freezing cold.
Yeah, and unfortunately, get ready for more of that as we go forward because we're going to be cutting down on services because we have to, because his spending agenda is so out of whack. He wants to spend $100 million for transgender healthcare services. Look, I don't know why that has to be an additional $100 million. I mean, can they get regular healthcare services? I don't understand what's going on. What is that money for? They're calculating almost $3 billion in lost revenues because he's going to allow fare jumpers on the subway system, and he wants to make the buses free. All of these things are going to bring the New York economy to a standstill, okay? And it's going to be back to what it was in 1975 when the city almost declared bankruptcy. It really kind of did, just optically it didn't. And that led to 5,000 police officers that were cut back, 6,000 firefighters. Imagine the loss of life then and what will happen now if we have to do that again. And we will have to do that again because he is spending money, his spending priorities are about like a leftist Marxist. And by the way, in addition to that, wait until he tries to bring, and what he's trying to do is bring more real estate, more apartments in New York under the rubric, under the federal government. As we know, the federal government is great in making sure that people have heat in the wintertime and air conditioning in the summertime. Just go ask the people who live in housing developments all across New York City what it's like in the wintertime and the summertime. So we're going to see a lot more of this, unfortunately.
You know what, Army, you voted for it and you're going to get it. And my sympathy levels are at an all-time low because you have a choice here and you keep voting in these dangerous, hard lefties.